We'll begin with the mandatory sermon. In these exercises, we've been placing emphasis on trying to be specific. And there's a reason for that, and that is it's a matter of focus. Because most sessions that you're ever going to do with astrology are requests for general readings. Sometimes that is okay to do a general reading, but usually it isn't. One reason that it isn't is because there's very little active participation on the part of the person whose horoscope it is. They just sit there and the astrologer paints more and more interpretations on them until they suffocate, and then your session is over. Very often in something like this, when something is being told to you authoritatively, it has a ring of fate about it. And astrology should never be put in a fateful context, because then the person can't do anything about it, and it's a curse instead of a blessing. Historically, that's one of the big differences between the Christian practice of astrology and all other forms. Almost all of the earlier forms, especially Arabic astrology, have placed emphasis on faith and not on freedom, not on the freedom to apply free will to change the astrological forces. Now, it's very improbable that a person is going to change the entire character. A person is lucky if they make a very few small changes in life rather than the whole character. So a general reading is not likely to be too helpful if you're trying to change character, because it doesn't have focus. At the other end of the spectrum, there is such a thing as being too specific. And when you're too specific, that is obviously when predictions are made. Now, a lot of astrologers like to make predictions. There's a good deal of vanity in making predictions, and it gives the astrologer a sense of power, as though they were part of destiny, because they can predict and know what kinds of things are going to happen, so they must be destiny's agent or something like that. By the same token, the individual becomes more of an agent, more of a subject of destiny, because they believe the predictions, and there's no leeway for change. And very often the predictions make things happen by putting a picture or a suggestion in someone's consciousness, and then they are brought to that. People who are seeking help from an astrologer sometimes do want predictions also. Now, in the history of divination, predictions have almost never been too pleasant for the people who receive them, even if they're positive predictions. It is because people get the whole notion of what the prediction is, and they follow that notion of prediction, and they don't understand the meaning of the event. So there is a place from time to time to make predictions, but when you do, it's important that you get the person to understand why an event of a given type is going to take place. Because if a person knows why something is supposed to be, they can participate in the ways that they can get much more out of it. But if a person assumes that they know what's going to happen already, they're not going to get much out of it, because they assume they know all there is to know about it. Or if they're petrified in fear, they're not going to get much out of it either. So what we're looking for in trying to focus or trying to be specific is we're looking for a Goldilocks scope. Something that's neither too large nor too small. And that varies from horoscope to horoscope and from situation to situation, what the focus should be. The best way to determine the scope is by interacting. Astrology should be an interactive process in which both people are learning and both people are participating in the whole business, or it isn't very valuable at all. In the interactive determination of what the scope should be, you're certain that there's going to be relevance. There's going to be relevance to the person whose horoscope it is because they're thinking about their life and what is important to them in that way. Now, in these horoscopes that we're doing, they do not have the convenience of interaction. We're dealing with people often who are dead. And it's not as though they called us up and made an appointment and we asked them, well, what did they want to talk about? Because we can't do that. So we're a little bit at a handicap when we're doing it this way. Anyone who has done much astrology frequently encounters this kind of situation, that you don't know what the scope has to be. So what we're doing is not optimal, and it isn't always pleasant, but a good deal of education can come out of what we're doing anyway. So I think we're about ready to look at the horoscopes. The horoscopes that we're looking at tonight are a little bit more subtle, what we're trying to get at this time around. And Ariel already knows who they both are. She figured them out, and she may have even met them both face to face. So let's look at the female horoscope first. All right, does anybody want to give what they think is the most important combination astrologically for the greatest virtue? Just the astrology combination. Yeah.
I'll try. I think the most important combination is Venus squared.
We're talking about the positive first. We're talking about the positive first. The greatest virtue, not the greatest vice. We're coming to that yet.
Oh, okay. I thought it was greatest combination. Okay, but okay, greatest virtue, maybe Saturn squared Venus. Not squared, trine Venus.
Okay. Anybody else got one? Sheila, do you have any?
Well, I have, the ones I have don't really interact with each other, and you've asked how they interact with each other.
Well,
This, yeah.
they interact indirectly. That's why
Okay.
this is a more subtle, this time it's a much more subtle thing that we're doing.
I think it's the Sun conjunct Mercury, sextile Pluto, and trine Neptune.
All right. Paul, do you have something?
I have Neptune trine the Sun and Mercury as the most positive aspect.
Okay. Mark?
I had the same.
Okay. I have the same, but I don't include the Mercury. I consider that on a secondary level. The Mercury sextile to Mars and Pluto, I consider that on a secondary and not quite as strong. And I don't know where to put the Venus trine Saturn in there. All right. Does anybody want to say what they think the virtue is to their combination? Yeah.
Sun trine Neptune, I had taken a guess that the Sun in the 7th house would mean that the person could act as a significant other to another individual, or if they were acting to a public, they might be a significant other or sort of a mother or other figure to a large group of the public, and they might be sort of a, what you might call a spiritual mother to somebody, or something like that, a spiritual or in some way religious significance, possibly with Neptune in the 10th, even to a large public organization, or even to a nation.
Okay. Raced a little far ahead, we just wanted to know what the simple virtue was, but that's, you're down a couple steps ahead of us here. The next step, Jerry, anything?
I was just thinking, if a friendly advisor or something like that.
Okay,
I have that she would have the ability to deeply connect with people on an emotional level, especially with the downtrodden.
okay. All right, Ela?
I don't know what to say about it.
Okay. Do you want to pipe in?
Me?
No, her.
Oh, sorry.
Do you know?
Well, you already know what I think. I could
Yeah,
pipe in, I guess.
okay.
I just, coming where I'm coming from, I think the most redeeming factor here is the sun in the seventh house.
I think the greatest virtue is that she knows herself and she can deport herself in such a way that she can be a symbol to society in some kind of mysterious kind of way. And for the secondary virtue is the ability to be forcefully quick-witted and to speak herself out very easily. All right, the astrological pattern for the greatest vice. Any,
The T-square.
all right,
Yeah.
all right. Everybody agrees with that then. I picked the Venus square the moon as the strongest part of it. All right, what is the vice or character flaw that is, if you want to take the whole T-square as a whole, that's fine, that you think is associated with that? Yep,
I think she might be greedy and go after other people's money.
okay. She may have been accused of that, but she was in with a pretty rough lot. Yes?
I have that she's tends to be confused, shy, vague, and withdrawn.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody else have any? My view is that she's probably hyper feminine and probably almost a stereotypical femme. And she's probably seeks freedom with abandon. And the vice is that she's probably extremely excitable emotionally. All right, the best positive scenario, if you're positive, we're taken all alone. We've already heard Mark's, which was very good. Does anybody else want to give a positive scenario if you let the virtues carry on to the ultimate?
Well, this,
Yeah.
I think the Saturn in this case is a plus. I mean, it's either exacting and she's probably even though she might not be, I would think that she tries to be what would be considered maybe true blue, and is probably seen as such as well.
All right. Gary, you want to try something or no?
No, I'm just gonna listen. I don't know what you mean by true.
Sheila, do you have something?
Honest,
Oh, I understand.
you know, I mean, what you see is what you get kind of thing.
Well, what I came up with was developing the ability to know herself in any kind of social situation, to really know herself very well. And because of that, being able to uplift herself and her spouse or her partner to a very high level. And it's almost like, you might say, the Zen of society, that she could bring it to a very, like it would be a spiritual art form if we're taken that way. All right, worst case scenario, yes.
Where does all this, I could see what you had just said,
Yeah.
but I can't see how the spouse comes into it. Is it just
The seventh
because,
house.
just because there's
Yeah.
the seventh house? Okay.
So you all are just taking the Sun Neptune as
That's what
one
I said
aspect?
was the primary virtue, astrological, we're just dealing with that part.
One aspect.
Yeah,
Okay,
and then
because
the other things,
Pluto.
The other things help it out. All right, what's the worst scenario if the bad stuff took over? Mark, you got something on that?
Well, I had a great deal of difficulty interpreting that aspect pattern, but I get the impression that you'd have someone who, with the sort of energy of Uranus in the 8th house and the moon being in Aquarius in the 2nd, had a certain Uranian Aquarian tendency toward active innovation and outbursts which felt constrained by being in opposite the moon or in the fixed houses, and you'd have a person who was sort of frustrated and given to erratic outbursts on occasion.
All right. That's a very interesting thing, I like it. Paul, what do you have?
I had, that for on the most positive side, she could overcome her self-doubt and then would be vitalized and would somehow serve the sick and poor, but her worst would be that she would become a person crippled with self-doubt
Okay.
and possibly her own self-undoing,
Okay. Ela?
Pretty much it's all been said. I think, yeah, she's emotionally of a lot of danger to herself
All right.
because
Well,
it's very explosive and it's in fixed signs.
what I came up with is that from being as femininely receptive as she is in the way that she is, she becomes emotionally needy. And the fix for the neediness is extreme desire for romance. And sometimes to compensate for that extreme desire for romance, she becomes a compulsive spender or buyer or something of that nature. And then I agree with Mark that if constantly held in restraint, that it results in emotional outbursts, very extreme emotional outbursts. Now the next thing we're supposed to do is to see how the two traits interact with each other. And in that case, I'm not going to ask for input from you because I don't think you would have understood what I'm trying to say, because this is a subtly different thing than we did last time. Now, the way they interact with each other is independently and indirectly. The reason for this is that the two patterns have nothing in common. And when that happens, they develop separate and apart from each other. They might even develop in ways that are antagonistic to each other. And that's the dynamic when you have two patterns that don't have a common planet. All right, now we can go down to how each one changes as a result of their interaction with the other. Mark, do you want to lead off on that?
I think I'll pass.
Okay. Jared?
How each one changes?
Yeah.
Well, because of the opposition, if I read this correctly, that is, my eyeballs aren't too short to read this. The opposition between Mars and the Moon combined with the T-square of Venus there, I think she'd have some sort of pangs between, alternately feeling guilty and then figuring she owes it to herself of, like you say, buying stuff, kind of gimme, 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 or I gotta have that type of deal, and then why'd I buy that? I don't really need it.
Yeah.
Type.
Well, it's not quite what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to get how the trine sextile pattern is modified because it has to deal with the T-square pattern, and how the T-square pattern is modified because it has to deal with the trine sextile pattern.
Well, I was trying to explain that that's how I see the T-square working.
Okay.
And with the Saturn trying to Venus, then it somehow sees what it's done, and so it somehow tries to make a restitution or do a good to it. for
Okay.
it. That's all I could get out of it.
Okay. Eli, got something?
Well, one is so very different from the other. I think the activity of the Moon and Venus and Uranus would give the Sun and Pluto a lot of material to work with
Okay.
in terms of who am I and what are my true resources and why am I behaving this way.
Okay.
And how would the T-square be affected by that? And I think in turn the T-square would feel the effect of all that probing and that depth. So it may help it in its emotional contortions. I haven't
Okay.
touched on the Neptune.
Yeah. Paul, do you have something on this?
No, I wasn't looking at it that way, and now that I do look at it that way, the only thing that I see is this influence of Venus in Taurus, but I really don't know.
Okay. Well, the way I saw it was that she's aware of the extreme emotional outbursts. And that brings more fervor to the trine pattern. It's almost desperate that she reaches for some kind of spiritual consolation or something of that nature. And it probably emphasizes more of the disciplinary role on the sextiles because the sextile of Pluto to Mercury indicate mental discipline. And she probably worked on that out of extreme necessity, the Mars being in there also, the Mars-Pluto being a combination of discipline. And now it's possible that the trines relative to the squares could turn bad if the squares get too strong. And the trine then of Neptune and the Sun could be escapist. And even the sextiles to the 8th house planets, let me escape into a fairy tale kind of world, is a possibility. And in that kind of case of sublimation, it might exacerbate the squares and opposition in the T-square so much because there's nothing controlling them. If she can pull off and live in this fantasy land, then there's nothing controlling. So it could go either way, and maybe does go either way with both of them. And the irrationality of the emotions make the self-study questionable. And unless she has really good intuitions about it, there's an awful lot of irrational emotionality, which again causes the tendency to sublimate away from it. And the ability to look, though, at herself with spiritual insight, or perhaps even psychological spiritual insight, brings her to be able to tell the difference between true love, the trine, and the trine of Venus and Saturn, so that she can determine the real thing as opposed to the false romanticism of Venus square Uranus, which is really extreme false romanticism. And so, like Hila says, the trine is given something to work on. All right, now we come down to the most likely prognosis for this. Who thinks what? Mark, you have any ideas of what you think the outcome of this one will be?
Well, I think the person would have an active and interesting life. My general feeling is that the good outweighs the problems, and that they would generally have positive accomplishments in life, but with a lot of ups and downs.
Okay, Jerry, what do you think?
Well, with all the goods and money that I see there, and that Neptune being so high, that's almost, what do you call it, regal. I was going to say, the life will probably be comfortable, but I would think that this person would probably come to a very sudden death.
Okay. Hila?
Yeah, that Pluto, Mars, and Uranus in the 8th house is very forbidding. It does not bode for much good. Even though, there's quite a few things in the houses of resources. But Pluto and Mars being there, I think there'd be some kind of tangle with underworld things or secrets and darkness.
Okay.
Maybe I don't understand that properly, but I saw the Pluto and Mars in the 8th house as that it could have a real positive effect of a kind of transformative energy, that this was possible, that this type of
So
thing
you think
is
that
possible.
that prognosis is stronger than the Uranus and the T-square?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I see to me, this person's main problem is self-doubt. That's what I see. That they're vague and they have a lot of self-doubt, and that they are able to overcome it through a kind of spiritual awakening, and also drawing on this thing of they are a very compassionate person.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to say anything more? First, I have to give a caveat, and that is that everyone learns from experience, because everyone has divinity within, and no matter how incorrigible they may be, they learn. That said, very often learning processes are very, very slow. It takes a lot of experience for a long time for something to sink in. I disagree with Paul on this. I think that the worst problem that this person has is the inability to control the emotions. And emotionality becomes deeply ingrown. And when we look at it, the T-square is in a fixed sign. So if you were working with this person and sitting in a session, you would have to impress on them without turning them negative or fearful. You would have to impress on them that what they're dealing with is very hard and they have to stay with it a long time, because otherwise it will come bouncing back whenever you let up on it. So this is because all of the faults are in fixed signs, and fixed signs are very hard to deal with. You have to change. Because the positives are as strong as they are, she'll probably not be hysterical. It's probably very unlikely that she'll flip out. But that doesn't mean that she won't have problems. Instead, what I think is that the two character patterns will diverge from each other, and that the spirituality and control in those levels will go to a very high level of development, and that the emotional problems, maybe in a way even being emotionally spoiled, will stay with her, and there will not be any severe crisis except the terminus that other people have been talking about. My prognosis on this was probably that all of the steps that were necessary to overcome the emotional bad habits were not overcome. She's probably going to have to contend with them in another life. Ariel already knows who it is, and Ariel has been up close with her.
Princess
So-
Diana.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I know who it is.
Everybody figured out who it is. all
But
right?
when you,
Everybody
I
knows.
finally looked at the date, which I had looked at, and you said they were dead. So I thought, oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is Lady Diana Spencer.
Can I ask you a question now that you've said who it is? When I look at the chart, it's like, and also knowing a little bit about her, it's like she had to seek the approval of other people at
Yes.
the expense of being who she really was inside. She had to play that public role, so she could never really fulfill her internal.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
She had to play a spiritual image role, because that Neptune in the 10th house means that she was a spiritual symbol for England, much more than Prince Charles was. He's sort of irrelevant at this
Yeah.
point. He's, you know,
He's just a couple of years is all he is.
So do you think that the outbursts were her trying to break out of that,
yes.
what was laid over her like that?
That exacerbated it, but I think that the problem was there all along. That's a deeply ingrained situation. All right, first the astrological pattern for the greatest virtue on the male chart. This is again where the virtues and vices are indirect to each other. Mark is always got good information. What do you think is the pattern astrologically that indicates the greatest virtue?
This was the one that fit your characterization of being very subtle and hard to interpret for me. But using your guideline of choosing the closest aspect, I picked out Venus trine Uranus as being the strongest positive.
Yes, okay. I think I would go along with that. Of course, that's because it's my way of determining criteria. All right, let's look and see what some others have to say.
So when you're looking at one aspect, you're not talking of like,
The
I mean, to me,
strongest-
I see the aspect, I see it as a flow of aspects from there,
Yeah, yeah.
including the moon. But
It's,
you would
you
just
can
read
look
one
at
of
it
them.
as the whole pattern if you like.
Yeah, because I see the pattern of the Uranus, Neptune, and Venus, because they're all interacting with each other and they're all very close.
Okay. All right, that's pretty much agreed. Only I would include the moon, because the moon makes the strongest aspect in that pattern. There is the sextile between Venus and the moon, and the sextile between the moon and Uranus, and the trine between Uranus and Venus. They're all together in that. And then the secondary to that is the Neptune. All right, what do you think this represents in this person? You want to dive in, Ariel?
I'm gonna listen.
Do you know who it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I didn't, in the beginning, and so I took a different approach.
Okay.
I guess I can say what it is, right? I
No.
can contribute.
No, let's keep it secret for.
No, I mean about, it's not an aspect, it's that house thing I did again.
Okay. All
And
right.
the sun in the sixth house, that sixth house becomes about self-transformation. It's the accumulation of everything before you get to the seventh house. So that is about transformation. That's just what I looked at when I looked at the chart.
Okay. I wouldn't look at it that way.
Yeah, well, that's my beginner's
But I'm going
stuff.
to bring that in eventually when we get somewhere in the tempering parts. Paul, what do you have?
I have a lot of stuff on positive and negative, but I didn't put in here what are
Just a simple virtue.
the simple virtue I have is extremely creative and inventive, and probably engaged in scientific work, either electronic or biological,
Okay.
through persistent effort and force of will, actualize a physical manifestation of
Yeah, but
cosmic
you're going way
laws.
beyond the simple virtue.
Okay, simple virtue then would be extremely creative, able to draw upon like a supra consciousness. That would
Okay.
be the greatest
Okay,
virtue.
good. Jer?
I was thinking that that's a highly spiritual person, and is able to help other people, maybe something like a marriage counselor or something like that, but highly spiritual because of Uranus being so high in the ninth house.
Okay. Ela?
Well, someone very attuned and comfortable with the feminine side of his nature.
Yes. Yep. Mark?
Well, I would say it's a highly innovative person, possibly capable of developing new philosophies in the fields of the arts or education.
Okay. Let's see. All right. The virtue that I came to, including the secondaries, is first an understanding of the feminine, an excellent imagination, a good intuition, and conceivably kindness. All right, the astrological pattern for the greatest vice. This is a giveaway because there really aren't too many negatives. Jerry, what do you think?
I haven't,
Okay. Mark?
Well, you'd have to take, I think, Saturn conjoined Jupiter square the Sun.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think I'd go along with that. I'd bring in the entire T-square. The secondaries are obviously the Mercury square Uranus and the moon opposite Neptune. All right, what are the vices or negative virtues that are associated with that pattern? Ela, you have any?
Once again, these are fixed signs.
Yep.
You're dealing with both Saturn and Pluto aspecting the Sun. So extremely harsh influences on the sun,
Okay,
holding the sun down.
yeah,
And Jupiter is kind of constrained by Saturn. So ordinarily, that would be very judicial.
Jerry? Yeah.
The question again?
The greatest, the primary vice and the secondary vice. Just real simple.
Primary vice, I don't know, but secondary vice might be a kind of fickleness, I don't know.
Okay, Mark, yeah.
I don't know, is there a possibility of an inability to act due to indecision?
Okay. Well, what I came up with from the T-square, which I thought was primary, would be the very strong quest for power. All of the big power planets are involved in that T-square. The secondary, getting all kinds of crackpot thoughts and even superstition. Crackpot thoughts from the Mercury-Uranus and the superstition from the Neptune-Moon. All right, now you can expatiate. If you look at the positives, and if it were the horoscope with only the positives, what would you expect from it? Jer?
With only the positives.
Yeah.
Undefinable love, I would think. I mean,
Okay.
very, very high ideals or something on that order. I mean,
Okay.
Venus trine Uranus. To me, that would seem to generate that new ways. I mean,
Eli?
depends.
This would have to do with some philosophy. Some philosophy that was pretty grounded because of the earth signs.
Mhm.
And
And probably because of the earth sign children.
yeah, the Venus, you mean?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think I know who this is now. I was close. I was kind of close.
I'm
although
surprised that everybody doesn't pick them all out all the time.
I had it more as a scientist or a doctor who invented a vaccine or something like that. But yeah, now I think I noticed. And as far as the, were we on the positives at this
Yes, the
point?
positive scenario, if only the positives existed and they were given free rein.
Well, I have, through persistent effort and force of will, would actualize physical manifestations of cosmic laws. Then I have via devices or medicines.
Okay.
So,
Well, what I came up with is that there would be a likely development of something like a feminist philosophy because of the strong Venus, Moon, Uranus all coming together in that way. And because there's so much on the west side, especially all of those things that deal with feminism, it would be a philosophy of support. And it's probably would be somebody who would become somebody that had all kinds of different ideas to bring in philosophical interpretation to. And this could probably even be a kindly, beneficent individual if only the positives were left there. All right? Mark, you want to give us the worst negative scenario if all of the negatives were all alone and nothing were curbing them?
Well, Is there a possibility of sort of a
Jekyll and Hyde, yes.
Jekyll and Hyde with a back and forth from the Saturn and Jupiter, concerned with the self and power from the opposition of Sun and Pluto? Sort of a brooding power hunger that sometimes acted and sometimes reversed course and brooded on the matter?
Yes, if you're saying an arbitrary
Yeah.
type of consciousness, yes, I think that's a very good insight. Paul, what have you got?
I have cold and analytical with a condescending attitude towards coworkers and employers. Manic depressive like mood swings, which make him unapproachable and liable to speculations so wild as to cause him to appear delusional and paranoid, which is further exacerbated by his many open enemies.
Very excellent. Very excellent. It's not only good astrology, it's true to the person. Jared, what do you got?
I'll just pass on this, and then I could come up
Okay,
with something.
Ela?
I'll pass.
Let me wing it as I'm doing. Looking at all the squares. Well, the Mercury square Uranus. Some pretty crackpot ideas.
Yeah.
The philosophy.
Yeah.
Mars square Moon. Some fairly powerful instinctual negative energy.
Okay.
Likes to be someone who is very powerful, appears very powerful to his friends, and I don't know if that's negative.
All right.
Well,
I agree with this. I think all of you outdid me on this one, because everything I agree totally with everything you said. Because there's so much ninth house, I see this person as a ideologue, somebody who follows an ideology, and it's not a very pleasant ideology. The person themselves, because the sun is in the sixth house, using Ariel's idea, is a functionary, or is very excellent about understanding the means to power and not only the philosophy of power. And the whole of it has a cold and calculating quality about it. The person has both a theoretical nature and a practical nature, which are often at war with each other. And because there is so much darkness and so much fixity, and because Pluto's in a combination, it's somebody who's likely to be not only arbitrary and authoritarian, but probably someone who is reactionary. All right, the next thing
I
is,
was
yes,
just gonna comment, I mean, before you said ideologue, I was gonna say, wouldn't the Jupiter make him extreme in his views in this?
the whole thing would be likely to extremes in views. All right, I'll just quickly skip the next step, or just mention it. This is again a case where the negatives and positives are not strongly interactive with each other. There is the opposition of the moon to Neptune, which ties things together, but that's not enough to make this seem like an integrated personality. So we go down to how each pattern is affected by the other pattern to be different than it would normally be. All right, who wants to lead off on that? Jared? No?
No, I don't
Paul?
That'd be-
Okay. I think we'll probably, you want to try something, Ela?
How each pattern affects the other?
Yes, how each one is affected by what the other one does.
Well, I think that the quality of wanting power and being somewhat ruthless about it. Would really grate on his the more gentle side of him. It would be a real struggle to and fro, even though they don't seem very allied. But it would almost seem like, yeah, as you said, I think you said Jekyll and Hyde earlier.
Yes.
It would seem like that. It's almost as though the negative ones would be wanting the arguments in their favor, and the positive ones would be wanting the arguments in their favor.
Mark, do you have any ideas?
Well, it's hard to resolve. It's similar to that first one, and the two halves don't seem to interact, and the characteristics as we've described them are very opposite. Somewhat of the hard nature of the T-square thing, but as we pointed out, the softer, more feminine in touch nature of the trine sextile system, and they don't seem to interact, and I would guess this person would have a lot of inner conflicts and go back and forth and regret this and that, and then act impulsively and go forward and back a lot. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
I was gonna say, what I see is, because of the fact that the trine between Uranus, the moon, and Venus is so strong, he gets these ideas, and there is just a real urge there. He knows that there is validity to these ideas. He knows, I think, that they're far out. But he also, I believe, knows deep down that this probably isn't the way to go. Yet there is that, because of the Pluto T-square and it being so secretive, he's kind of being driven to act on these ideas that he gets and that he digs up, and it
Okay.
isn't always pleasant.
All right. I came up with something similar. What I came to is that the positives were overwhelmed by the negatives, and they were put to the service of the negatives. And the imagination then becomes something like a rationalization for the hard things that he does under the negatives, so that he can say to himself, I know that inwardly I'm a loving, tender person, and I'm very understanding, and he uses that to alibi for the other parts. Also, I think the imagination either has to act as an escape from the harshness, which it normally wouldn't be, because normally imagination wants to be fulfilled, especially with the positive aspects. It wants to be fulfilled in making something of it. But in this case, it happens to be an escape. Then when you come to the other, there's the strong Saturn square the Sun, which shows both hate and fear. And the way the trines, sextile trines, affect that is, in his fear, he doesn't want to be seen as not being manly. And so he becomes more extreme in his Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto. He becomes very hard in that, and so he overcompensates like a sledgehammer. On top of that, he has Virgo rising, so he's real soft-spoken, and he feels he has to overcome that too. So he has to be tough in that kind of person. He's very definitely follows the statement of Teddy Roosevelt: "Walk softly, but carry a big stick." And so the imagination, he likes it. The tender loving kindness he likes, but he daren't let that show because he wouldn't be macho enough. All right, or he wouldn't be enough of a power person. Prognosis. Ela, do you have a prognosis of the outcome?
What prognosis? What outcome? Oh, of them interacting?
No,
with each other?
the whole life. What do you think in the whole life, provided the person does not get above astrology and apply self-conscious free will, what is the most likely prognosis for the character?
I don't know.
Mark, you have some?
Well, in this one, I tend to agree with you that the negatives would generally win out in the end. Although I think maybe I'd apply to it, there was some statement by Edward Gibbon, I think, about some Roman. He said his character was variously reported, or something to that effect. I think this is a person who would probably have a lot of different opinions about him and his work from other people. I mean, some would say that the hard part of it was necessary and good, and
He
others
especially would say that.
What?
He especially would say that.
Whereas others would say he was highly negative and perhaps destructive in various ways.
That's what I would probably say. Jay?
I was gonna say he was probably a tyrant, but look, Mark hit it, or when with all this stuff, all depending on who he talked to and what the moment was, this person would see him this way and the other person would have the question, well, who'd you talk to, you know, I mean, because it would be like two different people.
Paul?
I don't know, I don't know how these two things would reconcile each
Well,
other.
I tend to think that because of the fixed sign nature of it all, that it's very, very hard to change, and there isn't really enough integration to want to make the change. And so the two patterns are again likely to be divergent, and they're likely to be confusing to each other. This would be a very hard person to know personally. I wouldn't want to be married to this person because you'd never know what to expect next from him. So the fixed qualities will prevail, but there may not be sufficient experience from them so that he grows and changes. And all evidence is, from what he has said in the last few days, he hasn't changed. And so therefore he would be fixed in his way of looking at things, in his philosophy of power and how things are done, and would not grow. So I would classify him as a die-hard power monger, and the change would be little and late, if at all.
So it's the same thing as a megalomaniac?
Not quite. Megalomania is a little bit different, but it's somewhat along these lines. Did you get to photograph him up close to him?
Well, I've done the whole Bush family.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Paul, you know who it is, huh?
yes,
What did you guess it was?
Well, now I'm guessing it's one of the Bushes?
No,
No, who is it?
keep going. Who ran the White House? In the-
Oh, Cheney?
Yeah, that's Dick Cheney. It's really
No, I didn't
interesting.
See, I didn't, I was way off then, because I saw this person more as like a person like Tesla or
Oh, yeah.
someone like that, I didn't see him,
Well,
I didn't see him.
If you want to
that
see a
way.
Tesla horoscope, I'll show you a Tesla horoscope.
Yeah, okay.
well, that would be interesting.
It's enough to knock your socks off. I've never seen a horoscope like Nikola Tesla's.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I would like to
It
see
is
that.
pretty much like, excuse me, Paul.
Yeah.
It is pretty much like because you talk to, and a couple of people have been interviewed, and they talk about Dick Cheney as being the nicest guy, and kindness to that means, so
Yeah.
it depends on.
It is a Jekyll and Hyde, and when you hear him talk, it's really like Virgo. It's like me. It seemed like outward soft and sweet, but inside an SOB. Yeah, it's quite something. And his views, you know, his daughter is gay, and he loves her, and he comes out really strong for her, and there's understanding. And she supports him in his life, so his emotional nature is genuine. So this is quite interesting. Well, this is our last class. 3 years went by very quickly, didn't they?
I guess they did.
Next year in fall, on Wednesday, I'm thinking of having a course on ephemeral, horary, and electional astrology, which would meet every Wednesday. Not that I'm real keen, I'm very keen on ephemeral and electional. I'm not so keen on horary, but I figure if other people can do the horary, then I don't have to do them. So I think we'll get it all in 1 year. In fact, I'd do anything to add, sessions in order to get it done in 1 year. Thank you very much. It's been a good time.
Thank you.